Imagine spending 3 months building a beautiful website, only to discover thousands of users can't actually use it. Even worse, your company receives complaints or legal action because the site isn't accessible. In 2026, accessibility isn't optional anymore. It's a professional requirement. The good news is that many accessibility issues can be fixed in minutes if you know what to look for. Today, you'll learn the exact accessibility skills used by professional developers. We'll cover ARIA roles, WCAG standards, keyboard navigation, screen reader testing, and contrast ratios. By the end of this lesson, you'll know how to build websites that more people can use and that employers love to see. Let's get started. Accessibility, often called A11y, is the practice of making websites usable for everyone. That includes people with visual, hearing, motor, or cognitive disabilities. But accessibility helps everyone, not just people with disabilities. If you've ever watched videos with captions in a noisy place, you've benefited from accessibility. If you've ever zoomed in on text because it was too small, that's accessibility too. Modern accessibility standards are based on something called WCAG. That stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Think of WCAG as the rulebook for building websites that are easier to use. Most companies aim for WCAG level AA because it's considered the industry standard. Now here's a simple example. Imagine a page with 3 buttons. Every button says click here. Visually, that might seem fine, but a screen reader user hears click here 3 times. That doesn't tell them what each button actually does. A much better approach is to use meaningful button text. For example, download resume, add to cart, or submit order. Accessibility often starts with better HTML, not more complicated code. One of the biggest accessibility superpowers is semantic HTML. Remember when we talked about avoiding div tags for everything? This is exactly why. Semantic elements tell browsers and assistive technologies what each part of the page represents. Instead of using generic divs for your header, navigation, and content, use proper HTML elements like header, nav, and main. The visual result may look identical, but screen readers instantly understand the structure. They can tell users where the navigation begins and where the main content lives. That's a huge advantage. Semantic HTML is one of the easiest and most valuable accessibility improvements you can make, and it's completely free. If that realization just clicked for you, make sure you're subscribed because we're about to take it further. Sometimes semantic HTML isn't enough. That's where ARIA comes in. ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. Think of ARIA as additional information you provide to assistive technologies. For example, imagine a search button that only contains a magnifying glass icon. A screen reader doesn't automatically know that icon means search. By adding an ARIA label of search, you make the button understandable. Another useful attribute is ARIA Current. If a user is currently on the blog page, ARIA Current can tell screen readers exactly which navigation item represents the current page. You can also use ARIA Expanded. This is common for drop-down menus and accordions. It tells assistive technologies whether content is currently expanded or collapsed. ARIA is powerful, but here's an important rule. Use semantic HTML first. Use ARIA only when additional information is needed. At this point, you've already learned techniques that can dramatically improve a website's accessibility. Don't forget to grab the takeaway summary and code snippets linked below. They'll save you time when you start applying these concepts to your own projects. Now let's talk about keyboard navigation. Here's a simple test. Imagine your mouse suddenly disappears. Can you still use your website? Many developers never test this, but millions of users rely on keyboards every day. A common mistake is creating clickable elements using div tags. They might respond to mouse clicks, but keyboard users often can't interact with them properly. A button element is usually a much better choice. Buttons are keyboard accessible by default. This is another example of semantic HTML doing the heavy lifting. Focus indicators are also important. When keyboard users press the tab key, they need to know exactly where they are on the page. That's why visible focus styles matter. Never remove focus indicators unless you're replacing them with something equally visible. Another useful feature is a skip link. Skip links allow users to jump directly to the main content without tabbing through every navigation item. It's a small feature that creates a much better experience. Quick question for you. Have you ever tested a website using only the keyboard? Let me know in the comments. Next, let's discuss contrast ratios. One of the most common accessibility mistakes is low contrast text. Light gray text on a white background might look modern, but it can be very difficult to read, especially for users with visual impairments. WCAG recommends a minimum contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1 for normal text at the AA level. The good news is that modern browser tools can check contrast automatically. If users struggle to read your content, nothing else matters. Accessibility starts with readability. Now let's talk about screen reader testing. This is one of the fastest ways to discover accessibility issues. On Windows, many developers use NVDA. On Mac, VoiceOver is built into the operating system. When you test your website with a screen reader, you'll quickly discover whether your structure makes sense. A properly organized page with headings, navigation, main content, and footer sections becomes much easier to understand. This is where Semantic HTML really shines. Everything works together. And here's a modern workflow tip. Tools like GitHub Copilot and Cursor can help identify accessibility problems. They're becoming increasingly useful in 2026. But don't rely on AI alone. Always test with a real keyboard. Always test with a real screen reader. Real-world testing is still the gold standard. Let's put everything together. Imagine we're building a profile card component. We use Semantic HTML. We add meaningful alt text to images. We use descriptive links. We ensure focus states are visible, and we add ARIA labels where necessary. The final result may not look dramatically different from an inaccessible version, but the experience is dramatically better. More people can use it. More people can understand it. And that's the goal. Now, it's your turn. Take one of your previous projects from this course and perform a full accessibility audit. Replace non-semantic elements where appropriate. Improve your contrast ratios. Test the entire website using only a keyboard. Add ARIA labels when they provide value. And try using a screen reader to explore your own work. You'll be surprised how many improvements you discover. If you complete this challenge, you'll already be ahead of many junior developers entering the industry. Today, you learned one of the most valuable professional skills in web development. Accessibility isn't about checking boxes. It's about building products that everyone can use. You learned how WCAG provides standards, how Semantic HTML improves accessibility automatically, how ARIA enhances user experiences, why keyboard navigation matters, how contrast affects readability, and why screen reader testing is essential. In the next episode, we'll cover how to pass a CSS interview in 2026. We'll discuss BM, CSS modules, Tailwind, Core Web Vitals, and what recruiters actually expect from front-end developers. Before you go, take the quiz link below to lock in what you've learned. If this lesson helped you become a better developer, hit like, share it with another developer, and I'll see you in the final episode.